is the conservative, the black conservative. Now, generally, when I'm talking about people, I don't like to use names. One reason is because I just don't think much is gained by it. I think there's a certain weakness or lack of vocabulary that one tries to mask by calling names. Many times one can have a vocabulary, but emotions get in the way, out of control, and the names start. I have been capable of doing that. I have been guilty of doing that. I will likely do it in the future. Call names basically because I'm emotional about a subject. I have a sense of urgency in regards to changing a particular condition, and therefore I might use an analogy that may come across as insulting and can be construed as name calling. In this particular video, however, I will probably be accused of name calling, but it's necessary. And it's necessary based on an analogy or based on a comparison that I see between the black conservative and the buggy driver, the slave buggy driver who used to wear the top hat and the tails, right? And somehow thought that they had more of a investment in the plantation than the field Negro, right? The black conservative, there is really nothing that is more a testament to bad faith, as Sartre would call it. Defining oneself, trying to make someone believe or believing that you are something other than what everyone else can obviously see is not the case. And when we look at the black conservative, we see a person who is fooling themselves unlike any other person in the United States. When we look at conservatism, we're looking at essentially what? There are different ways of one being a conservative, different aspects of conservatism. But generally, when you talk about American conservatism, you are talking about three different aspects. You're talking about a fiscal conservative, you're talking about a cultural conservative, and you're talking about a social conservative. When you watch CNN or MSNBC, you will see black folks, right? And I do this because I don't consider them to be black in the true sense of the word. Malcolm, Martin, Huey P. Newton, Fannie Lou Hamer, Nat Turner, right? So I will say black. Now there are people who will say, well, you can't define who is black. Okay, that's your opinion. I personally define who is black for me. And you can accept my definition or not accept it. That's your right. But when we look at the so-called black conservative, as I've said, we are looking at someone who is a model for bad faith, self-delusion, being brainwashed, being oriented to the point where they are detriment to themselves and a benefit to other people. In every way that a person can be oriented to work against themselves and to see themselves as something that they are not, or to see themselves as something that they will be foolish to be, we see that in the black so-called conservative. Let's break down fiscal conservative. You'll hear black people say they are a fiscal conservative. Well, what that means is that they are opposed to big government spending and large debt, piling up debt, right? Now, imagine a black person, they are opposed to piling up national debt, all the problems that black people can have. Their concern is national debt, okay? Think about it. All the problems from dropout rates, to homicides, to being killed, unarmed blacks being killed by racist police officers, or just paranoid police officers, unemployment amongst college graduates, the fact that females with black sounding names are twice as likely to not be called back for job interviews. And you have a black person who says they are fiscal conservative and they are opposed to piling up national debt. That's a major issue. There is not one black person, I don't care who they are, I don't care how rich they are, where their position in the United States is so solid, is so reinforced, is so comfortable, right? Is so reassuring that the only thing they should be concerned about, or the number one thing they should be concerned about, is debt, national debt, right? But then you have big spending. So a fiscal conservative is opposed to big government spending. Well, what does big government spending generally mean? Big government spending generally is a byword, a code word for spending money on black people or poor people, right? Because you generally never hear people say, well, government is too big if money is being spent on the rich, or money is being spent on something supported by whites, right? You generally don't get that. When you get this opposition to government spending, it's usually because it is something that is going to blacks, right, or the poor, right? More times than not, to blacks, right? Blacks may be the majority of people who benefit from it, although some people in some other small way, other poor people in some other small way may benefit from it, right? But when it is majority of black people and the majority of people benefiting from a particular government program, right? When that majority is black, then you get this big spending, right? Now, for a black person to call themselves a fiscal conservative, right, in spite of the fact that big government spending is generally a code word, right, for spending on programs that would help blacks, right, then you see, again, that these people are alienated from their own people. Of all the things you can be concerned with as a black person, right, the main things you're concerned with if you are a fiscal conservative and a black person is debt and big government spending? Really? Now you tell me if the image of a sharp, nattily dressed, fiscal conservative black person isn't exactly like the image you get when you have that slave with that top hat and that coat and tails on top of that buggy, getting ready to take the master to where he has to go for his errands for the day, right? That is a perfect image. It is a perfect image. It's really no different in today's time. Next, let's look at a cultural conservative. Well, what is a cultural conservative? A cultural conservative is someone who wants to conserve the dominance of a particular culture. Again, look at a black conservative, a cultural conservative. A black cultural conservative is a black person who sees themselves through European culture. They see themselves through European, aka white culture. They see the idea of beauty as being white, their opinion as being the white opinion or European opinion of beauty being the ultimate opinion. What is intelligence? The ultimate opinion for these blacks is that supplied by whites. What is worthy? What is unworthy? What is good? What is bad? Right? What is worth government spending? What is not worth government spending? Right? What a so-called cultural conservative black person is trying to tell you is that you should define yourself by way of the European culture. Not the African culture, not Hispanic culture, not Native culture, not Asian culture, but European culture. Again, what's the picture that comes to mind? The house Negro with the top hat and the beautiful hand-me-down tuxedo tailed jacket, right? That's what comes to mind. Understand this. A black person who calls themselves a cultural conservative wants to conserve European culture. I don't care how nattily dressed they are. I don't care how well their suit fits. These are people who are not mentally sane. These people have something seriously, seriously wrong with them. Now, one can say that they can have high self-esteem and still see themselves through European culture. Yeah, that's quite possible. That's quite possible. But it does not mean that they don't have something wrong upstairs, psychologically. Next, let's look at social conservatism. Again, you expect for whites to feel this way. But when a black person says that they are a social conservative, what is a social conservative? You're trying to conserve the social relationships in that particular society. The social relationships in that particular society. What are the social relationships? The social relationships in American society are relationships between groups. And what is the catalyst, or what is the nucleus of American social society, right? White people. And every other group has to go around them and relate to them and orient themselves to that particular white group. So if we look at a black person who then says that they are a social conservative, then they are saying they want to preserve the hierarchy that has white people on the top and every other group, in the case of America, black people on the bottom. And these so-called black people have no problem with it. So to be a black conservative is not in and of itself something that is the same as being a black liberal. No, not in any way. To be a black conservative denotes a very serious flaw in a black person's character. A very serious flaw in their orientation to themselves and their orientation to the world. When you are a fiscal conservative and you are black, and you somehow have fooled yourself into believing that you are so well off, that you have so much money, that your major concern should be U.S. debt, that you are so well off, and that you are so safe in your position, that your major concern as a black man in a racist country, that your major concern should be big government spending. When you call yourself a proud black man or woman, and you are cultural conservative, you are trying to preserve the dominant culture of Europeans, to see yourself through their lens. When you are black and you call yourself a social conservative, and you are attempting to conserve the social dominance of whites over every other group without any challenge whatsoever to that particular hierarchy, then no matter how well dressed you are not thoroughly sane.